Oliver wasn't a lonely man, not really. Although others might consider him such, his days had a comfortable rhythm that he built himself, like a skilled conductor of his own symphony. Every morning started the same way. The rough scratches of a newspaper thrown on his doorstep before dawn were always accompanied by the same pot of strong tea. The tea was brewed for a long time, almost to blackness, and this drink was the first thing that touched his lips with the sunrise. Then he would go out into his garden, which had once been Lucy's pride. Now the garden was overgrown with weeds, but that didn't bother him. The weeds always won, but he found a strange comfort in these battles. Every gesture, every touch of the ground reminded him of the past, of those days when caring for the garden had a deeper meaning. Now caring for him became more of a symbol, something that kept in touch with a bygone time, with a life that never came back. Oliver's food was simple, yesterday's leftovers, warmed-up sandwiches, and then only when his appetite told him it was time to have a snack. The evenings were spent in quiet solitude. A radio with familiar voices, old movies flashing on the screen of his ancient TV, and the soft embrace of his favorite armchair. This chair, which had become an extension of himself over the years, was almost a living thing, which contained the imprint of his body, exactly as it had become after Lucy left. The silence of the house never depressed him. The sounds of the announcers on the radio, even their chatter about something distant and unimportant, seemed so familiar that they became the background to his thoughts. No, he was not alone, as he assured himself. It was the natural order of things. Life is not something that lasts forever. It is lived through and then ends like a book that is closed on the last page. But one sunny day, the silence was broken by a knock on the door. It was an unexpected sound, breaking out of the familiar canvas of his existence. Oliver shuddered, as if someone had disturbed not only his house, but also his inner world. He was not inclined to visit, especially at such a strange time, between lunch and dinner, when the day was not over yet, but the evening was just around the corner. When he opened the door, a young woman was standing in front of him. No, more like a girl. Her fiery red hair was escaping from under her knitted hat, and the backpack on her shoulders seemed almost bigger than herself. She looked confused, but not scared. On the contrary, her shy grin made something inside Oliver come alive for a moment, as if a breeze ran through his long-petrified heart. "I got lost," she confessed, her voice light and slightly out of breath, as if she had been walking for a long time. "I'm looking for the Oakwood campground, but I seem to have lost my way." Oliver looked at her with mild surprise. The Oakwood campground was in a completely different direction, and he knew this road like the back of his hand. It had been a part of his life for so many years. But despite this, his thoughts lingered not on the path, but on her tired face, on the genuine openness with which she stood in front of him. He was going to respond in the usual way, point out the direction and wish good luck. However, instead, other words came out of his mouth, completely unexpected even for himself. "It's getting dark. Stay the night. I have a spare room, and you don't look like you're going to hurt me." The words he uttered startled him. It was completely illogical. To take a stranger into the house? His mind whispered to him that this was stupid, that at his age it was better to stay away from unpredictable situations. But something else, older and forgotten inside him, awoke. Instinct, long lost among the quiet days and sleepless nights, whispered one word: an opportunity. Oliver remembered exactly the last time his house had hosted an unexpected guest. And now Belinda appeared in his life, a young, full-of-energy girl who, as soon as she crossed the threshold of his house, brought with her a feeling of fresh wind. Even in the first few minutes, she radiated gratitude and relief, as if her presence here was not accidental, but predetermined by some invisible force. Her energy filled his house with the same intensity with which she entered his life. It wasn't just the noise of her overflowing backpack or her socks scattered on the floor, mismatched, bright, like her character. No, it was Belinda herself. She filled his house with her presence, her stories, which spread like streams after rain through quiet rooms that had long been accustomed to loneliness. She talked about places that Oliver had only glimpsed in old documentaries that had been forgotten on the shelves of his memory, the noisy night markets of Thailand, where people shout, bargain, and laugh about the vast expanses of the Australian outback, where the silence is so great that it seems as if the world has stopped. These stories disturbed something ancient in him, long abandoned, like a branch that had been under the snow for a long time, but suddenly freed itself when it felt the first rays of the spring sun. Belinda's phone was constantly beeping, emitting harsh, almost musical sounds. A stream of messages, videos, and calls flowed endlessly through the screen. Her life was connected to Farah, a friend or someone else whom she mentioned in her quick, emotional conversations. At first, the noise was unbearable. It cut into his ears, like a rough stone scraping against the glass of his calm existence. But by the end of the day, he found himself listening to her words, asking questions about the places she described with such delight. He wanted to know more about the temple she had seen in India, or about an unusual fruit called durian, which she once tasted and showed him on the phone screen. Part of Oliver was still reaching for the routine. He wanted to go into silence, to a corner of his house where there would be no chaos, where everything would return to its former measured life. But another part, the one that he had long ago buried under the thickness of time, suddenly awoke. Her whispers were getting clearer, like water seeping through walls, and that part of him was telling him that a little worry wasn't so bad. Belinda wasn't going to let him back down. She was looking at him with that determined gleam in her eyes that Oliver hadn't seen in years. Her youth and energy were like a living fire, and she insisted that he show her the waterfall she had heard about in the town. At first it seemed like another duty, something he needed to do to see her off the next morning. But soon he began to notice that this walk was not painful. On the contrary, they laughed, especially when Belinda tried to parody the bird songs they had heard in the forest. It was a strange laugh, like a man who had long forgotten what it was like to laugh heartily. When the day was over, he felt a lightness that was so rare in his previous life. It seemed that time had become something more alive for him again than just a series of monotonous days. In a small town, gossip spread quickly. Soon everyone found out that a young girl had settled in Oliver's house. It was a topic of discussion at the grocery store, where Mrs. Bennet, with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes, cornered him between the shelves. "I heard you have a young lady staying with you, Oliver. Oh my God, how things are changing." Her words sent a thrill through him that he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't romantic, no, rather it was a feeling of something new, invigorating, like a breath of cool wind in the summer heat. He muttered something about just helping a lost traveler, but to be honest, Mrs. Bennet had touched on some truth that he didn't dare admit. Time passed, and unbeknownst to himself, Oliver began working with Belinda on cleaning the attic. Oliver was standing in the attic, inhaling the smell of old paper and dust, when his gaze fell on a box of Lucy's old recipe books. He hadn't expected that such a simple object would be able to evoke so many emotions in him, but a sudden surge of warmth enveloped his heart, breaking through the layers of time. It was as if Lucy's presence had returned to this neglected corner of his life. He slowly picked up the book, carefully brushing the dust off it, and images of their evenings together, when they cooked in the kitchen, and Lucy, laughing, experimented with new dishes, floated before his eyes. The whole room was littered with old things, a chaotic mess that Oliver wanted to run away from. However, Belinda, despite her restless nature, organized the space with amazing efficiency. Between her emotional tales of adventures in New Zealand, where she bungee jumped, or days spent in Bangkok markets haggling over trinkets, she created order. Her hands, quick and deft, organized things, freeing up shelves and creating a sense of space that Oliver hadn't felt in a long time. It seemed that the very air in the room became lighter, breathing became easier, and to his surprise, the room stopped feeling suffocating. One evening, as the soft light of the setting sun filtered through the kitchen window, flooding the room with a golden glow, Oliver heard Belinda talking softly on the phone. Her voice was worried, with a hint of desperation, and it worried him. She seemed to have problems with money and housing. Suddenly, an unpleasant knot appeared in his stomach. Oliver's practical mind screamed insistently about the need for caution. The gossip of the city floated into his head, now tinged with a harsh, disturbing tone. He began to wonder if it was all a hoax. Lucy's inner voice whispered to him with a slight irony, "You've always been too trusting, Oliver." But then other images surfaced in front of him. How Belinda smiled at him with that openness that disarmed any suspicion. How she cheerfully sang along to his father's old records, which he didn't even think anyone at her age would know. And there was that light in her eyes, a kindness that was too real to ignore. Without making a final decision, Oliver knocked on her door, awkwardly cleared his throat and, feeling his voice sound rude and even alien to himself, said, "Miss Belinda." The pause dragged on, but he gathered his strength. "I thought it might help both of us if you stayed a little longer. My attic won't clean itself." These words, which surprised them both, hung in the air, and instead of a tense confrontation, he offered her a short-term job, a small payment for continuing to help with the cleaning. Belinda quickly agreed, and their days gradually began to take on a new rhythm. With each passing day, they found forgotten treasures. Here is his father's old pocket watch, patinated with time. Here is the broken teapot that evoked Oliver's story about Lucy's first, unsuccessful attempt to bake cookies. Belinda, with eyes burning with curiosity, listened to him with genuine interest, encouraging him to tell more and more stories hidden behind each found object. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, Oliver began to realize that not only was he sharing his memories with her, but the city was also beginning to notice changes in him. The first sign was his fresh appearance. Oliver had cut his hair. It happened after Belinda, seeing his unruly mop of hair, sighed in fright, which made him embarrassed. Her reaction was convincing enough that he went to the local hairdresser. Then there was the smile that began to appear on his face more and more often, especially when Mrs. Bennet started teasing him about the guest in the house again. One afternoon they went deep into the garage and came across old photo albums. Among the many yellowed photographs, Belinda came across a photograph of Oliver, young, with wild hair hidden under a flexible hat. "Wow, you were very handsome then, Oliver," she said with a mischievous laugh, and her words awakened a warm but strange feeling in him. Oliver, looking at his younger version, suddenly felt that there was still a connection between the guy with the photo and today's him. Oliver couldn't help but smile as the memories of his time with Belinda flashed before his eyes like stills from a movie. Life seemed to be filled with surprises again, although he had previously treasured his established routine so much. Now, in addition to the usual rituals, morning tea, walks in the garden, which constantly required care, there was a place for something new, lively, sparkling in his day. A lot of this new stuff was related to technology, which he had previously met with distrust and mild annoyance. Belinda, always full of energy and optimism, taught him how to use the computer and the internet as if it were second nature to her. First, she showed him how to look for gardening tips. "You see, Oliver, it's like a giant encyclopedia, only much faster," she said enthusiastically, her eyes shining as she explained how one click can open access to thousands of knowledge. Oliver, of course, was skeptical, but he couldn't help but admit that finding the right information turned out to be really convenient. And then came the day when she convinced him to try ordering groceries online. "It's like magic, Oliver, I swear," she said with a playful grin, sitting on a kitchen stool and furiously tapping the keys of her old laptop. Her confidence confused him a little, but after seeing how easily she selected products and added them to the virtual shopping cart, Oliver gave up. He stared at the screen with deep suspicion, as if it were some kind of magical contraption from another world, and couldn't help but joke, "What am I going to do with all my free time if I don't go to the store?" Belinda just laughed and patted his hand. "Trust me, in an hour a whole new world will open up for you." Indeed, after they finally clicked the checkout button, Oliver felt strangely satisfied. The feeling that he had done something new, even if not quite in his usual way. 2 days later, when a cheerful courier brought the boxes directly to the kitchen, Oliver experienced real admiration, unpacking fresh tomatoes, neatly stacked bread that was not crumpled, as it often happened in his old basket. And when he came across several treats that he would never have bought himself, he was surprised to realize that the world, which had previously seemed so alien and cold to him, could offer something unexpectedly pleasant. Belinda stood in the kitchen doorway, her hands dusted with flour after another baking experiment. She was beaming, pleased with her rightness. "I told you it was magic," she said with a smile, and at that moment Oliver realized that he could not have expressed his surprise and joy better than those simple words of hers. But it was time for her to leave. Belinda found a job in a small diner and a tiny apartment above an old bookstore. Nothing special, but her face was glowing with a hope Oliver hadn't seen since Lucy. He wished her all the best, but the words stuck in his throat. Something about this farewell was not the same as before. He knew that this was not the final end, but only one of the stages of their strange but warm acquaintance. Oliver helped her pack a few things. As they were loading the last box into her friend's battered car, his gaze suddenly fell on something small and shiny lying on the ground. It was an old photograph, the one they found in the attic. In the picture, he is young, with that wild hairstyle and hat that Belinda called ridiculous, and next to him is Lucy. They were both laughing at each other, and there was something timeless, elusive, but so precious in that laugh. Oliver picked up the photo, and the memories of that distant, but so bright youth momentarily covered his head. He handed the picture to Belinda, but she just smiled, looking at him with a slight hint of sadness and something else, ineffable. Belinda held the photograph in a simple wooden frame, as if it were part of her own story, not just a snapshot of the past, but something deeper, more personal. "Thank you," she said in a soft voice, looking at the image, and there was an unexpected note of warmth and gratitude in her words. It seemed that this photo reminded her of the opportunity to start all over again, as if she saw in this picture not only the past, but also the future, which now seemed to her a little clearer. A smile played on her lips, as if she had found something long forgotten, something that gave her life a new meaning. "You know," she continued, hesitating, but still deciding to say what had been in her mind for a long time, "even in old houses there can be real treasures hidden. You just need to be able to see them." Oliver realized that she was talking not only about old things found in the attic, but also about people who, like himself, could hide amazing stories if only someone was willing to listen to them. When he closed the door behind her, the emptiness of the house struck him differently this time. For the first time in a long time, he felt that this emptiness was not frightening, was not painful. She became something else, something that gave him the opportunity to look at his own life in a new way. The photo, which had been gathering dust and was forgotten in the attic, now had to take its rightful place. It was no longer just a memory of the past, but a living testimony to the joy that had re-entered his life. The house in which he lived alone no longer seemed so silent and deserted. Oliver thought about Lucy's old recipe book, which they found in the attic. He smiled, remembering how Belinda lit up when she saw Lucy's famous apple crumble recipe. It was more than just a recipe. At that moment, it didn't seem right for Oliver to keep all the warmth that Lucy had left just for himself. After all, this warmth could help someone, become a spark for something new. The next day, he carefully wrapped the book in a beautiful package and went to Belinda's apartment above the bookstore. He stood at the door, hesitating slightly, but her surprised laugh when she opened it to him dispelled all his doubts. "This is for you," he said, handing her the package. "Thought you might need some inspiration for your new kitchen." Belinda curiously opened the package. Her eyes ran over the faded cover of the book, and a wide smile lit up her face. "Lucy's recipes." "Oliver, you shouldn't have. It's so valuable." He smiled, feeling his voice become softer. She would like someone to use them for their intended purpose, and not just keep them on a shelf. Besides, he added with a mischievous smile, I still couldn't get over her apple crumbs. A week passed, and Oliver was faced with a choice again. He was standing in the library, looking at flyers for a public walking group. His hand hovered over the phone number. He wondered if he would be able to walk with strangers, have light conversations with them, as he once did with Belinda. Old Oliver would, of course, have found an excuse and left, but now something has changed. He remembered Belinda's determined smile, her words that there were still many amazing moments in the world, and it gave him the necessary courage. Taking a deep breath, he dialed the number. It turned out that his city was full of surprises. Friendly voices greeted him in the walking group, and Oliver felt like he was part of something new. He even joked with Mrs. Bennet the next day at the supermarket. Her mocking gaze no longer seemed as heavy as before. Oliver hadn't changed overnight, but he was no longer the man who had once opened the door to a lost girl. He still enjoyed the quiet mornings in his garden, which, as always, had more weeds than flowers, but now a new melody filled his day. And, most importantly, he no longer felt lonely. The silence of his house was not that old, oppressive silence. It was a sense of peace that accompanied the realization that his life was still full of opportunities, joys, and people who were ready to share their warmth with him. And isn't that the whole point of life?